week, and including a former Mr. Basketball and Davon Davis. It was really good. Had good interviews this week. I know, it was really cool. So, this paper is exactly like writing an essay. Everything you write in here is similar for me. If you were, those of you who had me for government economics, then you've done this before, right? This is just stuff you've done. You have to find the thesis, right, of this book, and then find evidence that supports the thesis. Some of the theses are very apparent. In Feminine Mystique, is anyone reading something other than Feminine Mystique or Malcolm X? You're reading Bury My Heart, right? And the thesis is pretty obvious up front and looking backwards. The thesis, I mean, obviously it's about utopian society. This is what society's supposed to look like. If you talk to Mary Lee, she wrote the same paper last year, and she liked the book a lot.
It is actually really good. I'm impressed with it.
Most of the books I sign are pretty famous for a reason, right? I mean, they've changed society on some level. Malcolm X and Feminine Mystique and Bury My Heart specifically. We see Native American stuff differently now, much of it because of Dee Brown. Feminine Mystique starts the modern feminist movement, right? Malcolm X changes the way people see how black people see white people. I mean, there's the thing. How many of you read Malcolm? Oh wow, that's heavy in this class. Okay, after reading Malcolm X, now you might not hate white people like Malcolm hated white people, but can you see why Malcolm hated white people? After reading it, you're like, you know what? I can see why you think that. Now, you might not think it. Maybe you don't think you're the devil. But can you see why Malcolm hated white people? Okay, his thesis is not as apparent. He doesn't say, my thesis is white people are the devil. But isn't his thesis about why black people got a spot because of white discrimination and stuff? And he lays out evidence. His evidence is literally narrative, right? The evidence in Looking Backwards is more, it's narrative in the sense that it's a story, right? It's a novel. Malcolm's is literally just him telling you about his life. Is there evidence in there that proves why he didn't like white people? Is there evidence in Looking Backwards why the utopian society works the way it does? Is there evidence in, there's a lot of evidence. That book is chock full of evidence of how white people screwed over Native Americans. If you can't find evidence, then you ain't looking. Okay? Who's read, is anybody reading Feminine Mystique? If you read Feminine Mystique, right, that little corner, alright? There definitely is lots of it. Her thesis is relatively apparent. And there's plenty of evidence to suggest why women were in the state that they were in. Now, Malcolm is different than Feminine Mystique in that with Malcolm, because it's a story, Looking Backwards because it's a story, people probably need to read the whole thing. Most of the books, though, and when you go to college and you're reading a lot of books and doing scholarly analysis and stuff, you don't have to read cover to cover to get it. If you get your PhD in history, you're reading 5, 6 books a week, having to understand the thesis and the evidence for every single book, right? Do you think people have time to read cover to cover all day? They don't. And so what happens is you learn to read well. And what I'm trying to teach you to do this is to find the thesis. Find evidence that proves the thesis. So that means you can talk intelligently about the book, right? If you've noticed what I'm assigning you with Zen right now is to find the thesis and find evidence that proves his thesis. What do you do when you write an essay for me? You have a thesis, and what do you prove your thesis with?
Evidence.
Evidence, right? And analysis. That's what all these books are doing. Now, Malcolm analyzes in a different way, but he definitely analyzes why white people were horrible to black people in his life, right? It's anecdotal, but it's still analysis. Yes?
The evidence for Malcolm, do you just use like the events of his life?
Well, we're going to talk about that in 1 second. I'll get to that. So when you write it, all right? So the intro paragraph is going to be really, really important. Also, will I be able to tell if you read every single page of this book when I read your paper? Probably not. Will I be able to tell if you know what you're talking about? Yes. There's a difference between reading every single page of the book and knowing what you're talking about. Okay? And you're like, oh, I only read half the book and Sarah gave me a good grade. Well, you can read half the book, right? In Feminine Mystique, there are certainly chapters you can skip. And there are certainly chapters that if you skip, you're in real trouble. If you skip the chapters about media and advertisements and stuff, then you've got real problems. Because I will write all over your paper asking where this stuff is. But there are other ones where she's just not as important, right? Sometimes some arguments are better than other arguments, right? Isn't that the case? And bury in my heart, there are certain chapters that really hit home more than other chapters, right? So which chapters should you use? The ones that don't hit home as well, the ones that are really specific and give lots of evidence? B, right? You use B. All right, so in the intro, right? So this is our intro paragraph. Can you guys see this green?
Yeah, barely.
All right, I'll choose pink. All right, in the intro, can you give a little bit about the author in the background? Yes, I don't want this paper to be about this, but yeah. In the intro, you can give a little about the author and the topic, right? If you're writing Friedan, if you're writing up there in Mystique, I need to know a little bit about Betty Friedan and why she's doing what she's doing, because it puts the whole paper into context. Bellamy's the exact same way, right? I mean, he's a late 19th, early 20th century socialist who dreams of a utopian society. If you just sort of start walking into the paper without me knowing that, it doesn't really put it into context, right? Malcolm X, we need to know why Malcolm's writing. You also know this book came out right before he was assassinated, right? So the book also means even that much more. Betty Friedan, if you're curious, died a few years ago. I think Lee Brown's still living, I'm not sure. Bellamy's dead, but...
I think he died.
Did he? The next thing, right? Now some books have this, some books don't. Is the question that's being asked. Friedan definitely has this, right? What is up with this question that has no name, right? How many times she talked about the question with no name? That's what she's trying to answer. Why is it that women feel the way they feel? These women have husbands that are successful, they're going to have children, they live in nice houses, they have nice cars, their kids go to nice schools, and they are miserable. And she wants to know why. Is that a reasonable question? With Malcolm, the question isn't why do white people suck, so sometimes there's a question trying to be answered. Those of you who had me for government economics, remember the chapter titles like, why did drug dealers still with their moms, right? Where have all the criminals gone? When did Roshan by their name swell sweet? Those are actually questions they're trying to answer. Sometimes they have them, sometimes they don't. You also need to identify the author's thesis. You need to be able to identify what the author is saying, what the author is trying to prove, what he or she is trying to prove. At this point, I would hope all of you have your books read. If you do not, at this point, you better know at least the thesis, or you've got some problems. When you're able to identify the thesis, it allows you to read more carefully, right? It also allows you to discriminate in what you want to read and what you don't want to read. If you know the thesis of a book, and you're looking for evidence to prove it, let's say you're reading Friedan, right? And you get into it, because Malcolm's different, because you should read the whole thing, because it's a story, right? And trust me, the end is even, it's like a surprise ending, we know what happens. But like, well, he doesn't write about his death, because that'd be awfully odd, it's an autobiography. But, soon I'm going to die. But, although he does talk about, he assumes he's going to die. Have you read the whole thing? If you haven't, you're going to find that he assumes that he's going to be assassinated. Many people who are assassinated know it's coming. So, in Friedan, if you read the first 2 pages of a chapter and you're not seeing any evidence that makes a lot of sense that you can deal with, what should you do? You should move on, right? When you start saying, oh wow, this makes a lot of sense, it's really connecting with you, well then you need to be writing down stuff and making sure that that's the evidence you're using. Bear in my heart, every chapter is a different Native American culture, right? A story of what happened to each one of them. Some of them are really powerful. The Nez Perce one is really powerful, right? The Northern Cheyenne one's really powerful, but some of them just aren't as powerful, right? And so you can move on if you want to. Now some of the stories are sad and you sort of just get caught up in what's happening, right? I don't necessarily mean to pick all the books where you're going to hate white men. It sort of seemed like those are the books you guys are choosing in general. So on behalf of all white men, sorry history, sorry for that. Do what?
Turn attacking the younger generation against the older generation.
Well, no, I have had lots of parents say that I try to make kids more liberal. I can tell you I don't care what you guys think. What am I trying to make you do?
Think for ourselves.
Think for yourselves. I want you to think for yourselves. I'm essentially bringing up stuff you wouldn't have seen otherwise, right? I don't care what you think, but you should be able to at least see all sides. Does that make sense? Okay, the last one is your thesis. The last sentence of the paragraph is your thesis, right? Your thesis is answering, does the author successfully prove his or her point, and how? So a thesis could be something like, Friedan successfully proves her thesis by showing or by illustrating that through the use of effective media propaganda, psychoanalytic analysis, and yada yada yada, women have been were forcefully pushed back into the home through social pressure. And every single paragraph is going to be about one of those things in your intro, right? Immediate thing, a Freud analysis. You guys read this stuff about Freud yet? Right? That was really interesting, right? The whole penis envy thing is interesting. It's sort of been disproven scientifically or psychologically, but that was his argument for why women should be subjugated, and you have to deal with it, right? Because it's one reason why she was arguing why it's a bad theory. So, if it's Malcolm, right? Look at big ideas of why Malcolm is so mad. What are some of the big ideas? This is getting to your point. What are some of the big ideas of why white people he hated white people so much? He thought they were, because what did he want? He did not want to integrate with whites, did he? What did he want?
Separation.
Separation. Not integrating, separation. Because of what whites had done. What had whites done in his experience?
Made the blacks more.
Okay, so what did white people do to his father?
They killed him.
Killed him. Where were black people put because of segregation? In the crappy areas of cities, right? Who was the one in the end who brought drugs into the streets? Whites or blacks? Whites. Who brought prostitution into the streets? Who put blacks in jails for violating the rules that white people wrote? You see what I'm saying? Are those big ideas that you can focus on? You don't have to tell him about his life. Obviously his life's going to come up because this is his experience that makes him feel the way he does. But I don't want a paper just telling me all about Malcolm X. You will find very quickly that you get a bad grade. In fact, I won't read all of it. After 3 pages, if it looks like you're just telling me about Malcolm X's life, I'm just going to put F and put it in pile. But so you don't have to go into chronology, right? In chronological order, you can say, okay, one paragraph can be about, the way white people have put blacks in jails. Doesn't he have a lot about his experience in prison?
Yeah.
So use his words in prison. Use what he's done in prison. If it comes to like drugs and alcohol, what does Nation of Islam do when it comes to drugs and alcohol?
That's the same thing.
Yeah, no drugs, no alcohol, none of it. Why? Because they don't want to help white people, right? They want to be prideful in who they are. Doesn't he speak about that a lot? Okay, and that's the evidence that you use. If you're doing Bellamy or Barry or whatever, or Friedan, you're taking the evidence that this person is writing and using it as how he or she is proving the book. Does it make sense? So Friedan is using media to show all the different media things. I'll give you an example, and I'll show us the first block. We're going to look at this later in the year, but this is there is a set of advertisements that were in newspapers that were put together. Okay, these are advertisements for jobs. Okay. As you who read Friedan, you're seeing that the way that these jobs were set, it was forcing women, assuming women were going to be housewives, and sort of socially forcing them in there. And if you were a working woman, you were sort of socially scorned, right? If you didn't want to achieve your degree and go be a professional, that was not the norm in magazines and books and everything. Here are some advertisements in 1957. This stuff really made Emma really mad last year. This one is advertised. Brides, housewives, right? That's the title of it. Have you 2 or 3 days to spare each week? This part-time job in a pleasant, air-conditioned Michigan Avenue office will take you away from home just enough each week to sharpen your interest in your household tasks. This literally is the newspaper. This is how they're advertising. Come on, housewives. It'll help you get better at being a housewife. I'll go down a little bit further. No previous experience is necessary, but an alert, intelligent attitude and liking for people who are important. And liking for people who are important. Is she important? No. Here's my favorite. If you find this offer appealing, and you're between the ages of 22 and 45, with a high school education, then you can apply, and tells where. When they say you have to be between 22 and 45, what are they really saying?
You need to be young.
And
Married.
good looking. We don't want old girls. We want young, good looking women. That's what they're saying. Is that legal today, by the way? No. This one is for an airline ticket sales girl. This job is just for women and they use the word girl in it. Hold on, this is the airline ticket sales girls. Single girls receive travel passes for themselves and their families. Isn't that interesting? Single girls receive travel passes for themselves and their families. You don't live in 1957, you don't know what that means. Today, when I say a candidate is law and order candidate, in the 50s, if you're a law and order candidate, you know what that means? What that goes code for? It's code for you hate black people. When someone said, I'm law and order, that means you hate minorities. You know why single girls get to travel free? Because that's who pilots are going to take with them when their wives are at home. It means, come cheat with me. I'm a pilot. You can travel for free. That's what it means. What are they saying about women in this? What are women? They're objects. They're objects. They're not to be taken seriously, right? If you show up for the job, you better be good looking, you better be young, and you better be okay with us oogling on you. I will tell you, when I was first, I was a benefits analyst at an automotive corporation, and every one of our secretaries was just smoking hot. And I was like, I was 22 years old, and I was pretty happy with this arrangement. And I finally went to one of the guys hiring, and I said, how come all of our secretaries are hot? Don't other people apply? And he said, yeah. He said, if it's between a hot girl and a non-hot girl, why would I choose the non-hot girl if they have the same qualifications? All right. And he said, also, you can teach a girl to type, but you can't teach them to be hot. Women are seen as objects, right? That was in the late 90s, so maybe Betty Friedan hadn't filtered through my company. But that's the kind of stuff she's talking about. Could you use this as evidence as to how women were being objectified? Betty Friedan has that kind of stuff. Malcolm has anecdotes. Use what the author is saying. Use the author's words. Do not give me big giant block quotes. All right? Have it weave into how you write. It should flow. Not big giant block quotes, because I don't read them anyway. I'm going to just put lines through them. Right? Flow, evidence, analysis, it's not that bad. Once you get good at this, when you go to college, everyone's going to be doing this, and they're going to be having a hard time, and you're going to get done in no time, and it's going to be better than theirs, and you're going to thank me. In fact, I had somebody come today before school and thank me for, I say twice today already, I've had 2 people in college come and thank me for stuff that I had forced them to do while they were in high school. Alexis Corbin and Erica Wilson, who's now an econ major at Berea. And Alexis Corbin was like, the best way to study for a college history test, take AP US, because they're all really easy. Your government class is easy. So my goal is for you not to be not to go to college and be prepared. It's to be awesome at college, to dominate it and hurt its feelings. All right. Questions on this? Every body paragraph is the same thing. Mini thesis, evidence analysis. Mini thesis, evidence analysis. Mini thesis, evidence analysis. In the conclusion, can you look forward in the conclusion, like results? What has Betty Friedan's work done in today's world? How do we see African Americans in today's world? That's fine. Shortcomings, non-shortcomings. Listen, can you agree? Can you say Betty Friedan's work was not successful and did a bad job proving its point? Can you say that? Absolutely. Absolutely. What do you need to do then?
Support it.
Support. If you can find evidence, you line her up. I don't care. I do not have a giant. I mean, if you don't like Betty Friedan, you're not going to hurt my feelings. I'm not going to go home at night and have a hard time sleeping because you guys don't like the way she wrote. I will tell you, it's been pretty successful since she started the modern feminist movement and changed the lives of women forever. But that's neither here nor there. Any more questions? Please ask. Yes.
Can we have like 4 or 5 paragraphs?
You can light it up, homie. Just don't go more than 7 or 8 pages,
Okay,
right?
don't go on.
Yeah, usually you're going to have more than 3 main points,
Yeah.
right? That's okay. Like the advertisement thing for Friedan, that's more than just a paragraph. I mean, there's so much evidence she has in those chapters about media, right? So you can use more than 1 paragraph if you want. It's fine. You can do more. Yes.
When you say whether or not the author successfully proves their thesis, can you like say that there's a gray area instead of saying they
What do you
do
mean?
or they don't? Like they do in such and such case, but
Okay, so they're, okay, yeah, if you want to, you mean qualified essentially?
yes.
If you want to say, while Friedan is successful in proving her thesis with yada 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 evidence, this evidence over here falls short. How do you do that? What's your say? Okay, sure. And we go to the office for a second. Okay, that's a good question. Very good question. Other questions? No? Does this seem a little bit easier now? I mean, it's just writing an essay, except you got all the evidence in front of you. So as long as you've read the book, this should be no problem. If you haven't read the book, you've got a whole week of regular AP stuff, plus the paper, plus the reading, and that's a lot.
Unless you already have all the outlines.
Then you're good to go. G to G. Nothing?
Which you don't have.
Yes.
So like, if you're writing about Malcolm X, could you talk about in your conclusion about how they tend to use reverse racism now?
Well, I don't know how that's relevant to what Malcolm X is writing. Who's they?
Like
All black people use
No.
reverse racism?
No.
Well, then how is it relevant? I mean, the fact that are some black people racist?
Yes.
So how is that going to enter into the fact that Malcolm X wrote a book? That there are some black racist people? See what I'm saying? It's going to be relevant. And by the way, there were black racist people before he wrote the book. Although there have been people who think that black people can't be racist. Because racism is the thing about power. And since they hold no, because those African Americans a long time ago held very little political power, racism is about using power against another group. And since African Americans had no power politically, they couldn't exercise racism. That feelings and power were 2 different things. But I don't agree with the theory, but it's a theory. Anything else? Please ask. This is the last time. Oh, well, obviously you can text me and stuff. That's fine, but no. Okay, can you stop it, please?